Welcome to It's Getting Better All the Time Mental Health Outreach with your host, Sister A. Legree, providing information and support while encouraging hope and faith. You can log on to our website at igbattmho.org. Again, this is It's Getting Better All the Time Mental Health Outreach with your host, Sister A. Legree, providing information and support while encouraging hope and faith. You can log on to our website at www.igbattmho.org. While we're waiting for the system to kick in, just want to let you know you can always, again, log on to our website for information, for support, for resources. You can give us a call in our Maryland office at any time. Please email us at support@igbattmho.org. You can email us there. You can write us at Post Office Box 7432, Silver Spring, Maryland 20910. Today's broadcast is entitled, I Just Go to Sleep. I Just Go to Sleep. I know that for some people that sounds like a strange or interesting title, but let me explain it. I just go to sleep. What many people, when we're dealing with depression, when you're dealing with issues that are too big for you, or when you feel overwhelmed, there's a tendency to withdraw. And a lot of people, we withdraw different ways. Some people withdraw by actually doing just that, going to sleep, staying in bed all the time. And now don't get me wrong, there's some times when we all need to withdraw. We all need a moment to by ourselves. But I'm talking about as a coping mechanism. Many times we'll say, I just go to sleep. And I'm hoping that if I go to sleep, maybe things will be better when I wake up, or I'm thinking that maybe I don't have to deal with the things that I need to deal with. So I just go to sleep. So that's what happens. People just go to sleep. Sleeping, withdrawal, procrastination, daydreaming, fantasy, drug use, distractions are all strategies we use sometimes without even knowing it to keep us from facing the reality of our life. But success or overcoming our problems will involve us confronting those things that we want to hide from. So let me read this again. I have it here and hopefully everybody can see it on the screen, but I'm not really sure, so I'll read it. Sleeping, withdrawal, procrastination, daydreaming, fantasy, drug use, distractions are all strategies we use sometimes without even knowing it to keep us from facing the reality of our life. But success or overcoming our problems will involve us confronting those strategies, confronting those things that we want to hide. So yes, sleeping, withdrawing, procrastination are all things that we tend to do when we get overwhelmed, when we're dealing with something, when we're dealing with sadness, when we're dealing with a depression, when we're dealing with an issue that we feel that we can't handle. These are all some things that we tend to do. The problem is that these things, going to sleep, withdrawal, and procrastination, don't help us in the long run. Because in the long run, we have to confront our issues. We have to deal with our issues. We can't run away from them. So what are some strategies? Treating the depression, connect to what is going on around you, right? And I'll talk about that a little more. Admit your feelings, connect to what is going on in your body, pay attention to what you're feeling, identify your triggers, your stressors, and come up with a plan. We have to connect to what is going on in our lives. Now, my next slide says here, that sounds real easy, right? That sounds real good, but it's not always easy to do. It's not always easy to connect with what's going on around me. Because see, when we withdraw, we are disconnecting from what is around us. We are disconnecting from our world. We are disconnecting from the problems. I'm saying, I don't want to think about my problems right now. I don't want to deal with my problems right now. And again, sometimes we all need a break, right? But sometimes we engage in those types of behaviors more than we should. We're sleeping more than we should. We're smoking marijuana more than we should. We're drinking more than we should. We're watching TV more than we should. We're gossiping more than we should. We're getting caught up with what's going on in the news or on the internet more than we should. Because what happens is when we do those things, it distracts us from our life. Our problems, the things that we have to deal with, don't go away. They're still there, okay? Now, let me stop here. For some of you, do you really think witnessing people dying in front of you will not impact you? And if none of these apply to you, then just ignore me. But for some of you, do you really think witnessing people dying in front of you wouldn't impact you? Holding your best friend in your arms, watching him bleed out from a gunshot wound didn't impact you. And this was maybe like the 7th or 8th friend that died this year. Being removed from your parents and being placed in foster home after foster home after foster home didn't impact you. Living in poverty and always wondering where you were going to live, do you think that didn't impact you? Witnessing violence in your home and always wondering if and when you were going to be abused, do you think that didn't impact you? Do you think living in a home with on the outside your parents look wonderful to everybody, but on the inside, once the door closed, they were abusive? They didn't care. They had all the money in the world, but they didn't care about you. Do you think those things didn't impact you? Okay, they did impact you. But what happens is because we develop coping strategies, which are great. We develop coping strategies which are needful, but some of these coping strategies that we're dealing with are not always helpful. They're not always needful in the long run, right? So some of these coping strategies were fine at the time, right? I needed to, maybe to smoke marijuana and help me to get through school, and help me to deal with what's going on at home. But now, this is your time for you to live. I want to talk about triggers and emotional dysregulation. Emotional dysregulation is a term used to describe an emotional response that is poorly regulated and does not fall within the traditionally accepted range of emotional reactions. And I got this from WebMD, and you can see the link there. A trigger is something happened in the now that takes me back to the then. For many of you, now there are some people who like using the word triggers, and they like using the word emotional dysregulation, and they like using the word trauma. But then there's some of you I'm talking to, you don't realize that what you're dealing with is trauma. You don't realize it because you don't realize it because you're strong. You don't realize it because you just keep going. You don't realize it that you just get used to things and you just don't think it impacts you, right? Oh, that's a word, that trauma. I'm tired of hearing that word trauma. I'm tired of hearing the word triggers. That's something that certain people deal with. I don't deal with that. But what I'm here to say to you, is that for some of you, some of the things that you're dealing with, okay, are as a result of the things that have happened to you, of those bad things that have happened to you. Just because you think you're making it through, that you're dealing with it, doesn't mean that you're really dealing with it effectively. Again, how you survive, whatever we do to survive is whatever we do to survive. That's no problem, right? We have to do what we need to do. But once you get out of that mode, now you have to take a look at, is this still helpful for me? So what happens is, because I learned that whenever, to escape the what's going on in my home, the loudness, the fighting, the cursing, the beating people up in my home, I've learned to deal with that. I withdraw by sleeping. I withdraw by daydreaming. I withdraw by doing alcohol. But now you're out of that situation, and some of you are still engaged in those same strategies, using those same strategies and those same coping mechanisms. Our emotions are impacted. When someone is experiencing emotional dysregulation, or triggers, they may have angry outbursts, anxiety, depression, substance abuse, suicidal thoughts, self-harm, and other self-damaging behaviors. Excessive substance use, high-risk sexual behaviors, extreme perfectionism, conflict in interpersonal relationships, eating disorders. Over time, this condition may interfere with your quality of life, social interactions, and relationships at home, work, or school. And again, I got this from WebMD. I'll have a link on our website, but here's the link here, because I wanted to share this before I go on to make my point. Okay? So, what are some reasons? Okay? Early childhood trauma, child neglect, traumatic brain injury, feeling like your thoughts and feelings are rejected, ignored, or judged, and you're not being heard. And again, you see this in certain personalities, borderline personality disorders, OCD, trauma. When I'm talking to you, what I'm saying, that many of you are dealing with trauma. You don't call it that, but you're dealing with trauma. As I said before, do you really think witnessing people dying in front of you wouldn't impact you? Even myself, in the work that I do as a clinician, I was talking to someone, and I realized that as I started counting the number of people who I knew had gotten shot, or I'd come in contact with, people who I'd worked with, right? It was like about 11, 12, and that's me. All right, and I don't even live, people like say, in a certain neighborhood, but where I work at. Okay, another time I was talking to someone, and I had finished a session, and I realized that I had gone back to back to back to back to back, listening to trauma to trauma to trauma, and 7 or 8 people talking about death. So again, just because we keep going doesn't mean that we're not impacted. We are impacted when our emotions, right? You ever wondered why, something happens and people just go from 0 to 100? Even their emotions. Something small, something sets you off. Well, it's not that issue that sets you off. It's the issue that you haven't dealt with from before, right? No, it's not the fact, okay, somebody stole your bike. Somebody stole, I'm going to say you stole your bike. Somebody stole, you and your brother are talking, and he got the last piece of chicken. And you just go in rage. You're just upset, and you guys are fighting to the death over a piece of chicken. It's not the piece of chicken that you guys are fighting over. You're fighting over the feelings and the thoughts of being rejected, being ignored, judged, not being heard. The trauma, okay? The watching your loved one die and not being able to do anything about it. The police brutality, going from foster home to foster home, being in abusive relationships. That is what you're fighting over. Because see, sometimes in certain situations, we were unable to do anything about it. We just had to take it because we were young, or we were in a situation we couldn't do anything about what was going on. But those feelings are still there. Just because we keep going doesn't mean that we're better. That we're okay. I always use an example like a Band-Aid. Just you have a wound. Some wounds need to be cleaned out. Some wounds, you can just put a Band-Aid on it and it'll heal on its own. But then there are some wounds, because of the intensity of the wound, it has to be cleaned out and it needs stitches before you put a Band-Aid on it. Some of us are walking around with wounds that have not been cleaned out. Why is it so important? It's so important because you have a purpose. You have a reason for living. We cannot let the pain, our emotional pain, to cause you to live below the life you should be living. Just because things have not worked out in the past doesn't mean that they will not work out now. What you did to survive is great, but are those survival skills helpful now? So here's the thing I want to leave you with. You got to have a plan. We have to manage our emotions. Number one, we have to understand where these emotions are coming from. Why do we go from 0 to 100? Why do we get so angry? Why do we get so irritable? Why do we feel like people are disrespecting us? Why do we feel like something happens and we automatically think it's our fault? Somebody don't call me back. I feel rejected. Where are all of these things coming from? They're coming from because things that we never dealt with, right? Number one, don't hide. Okay? When you find yourself sleeping too much and withdrawing, and again, let me tie this back to my first slide, withdrawal. When we feel a certain way, when we become triggered, some people act out, some people withdraw. But that withdrawal is still a negative coping mechanism. You're sleeping, smoking marijuana, watching TV. What are you hiding from? What could you be doing if you wasn't sleeping most of the day? If you wasn't smoking marijuana? If you wasn't, using alcohol? And again, none of these things are the issue. It's the excessive use of these things. You go from TV show to TV show, YouTube channel to YouTube channel. What are you hiding from? Okay? The goal is to start by running less. Running, I'm talking about hiding, withdrawing one day at a time. Managing challenges one day or challenge at a time. Write down, what are you hiding from? What is it about your life that's so miserable that you want to sleep all day? And for some of us, it's a depression. Some of us, it's a sadness. Some of us, we're just sad, we're depressed. We got to talk about it. We can't hide from life. Engaging fully in your life and the world around you is important. What's keeping you from engaging fully in your life and the world around you? Like I said, you have a purpose for being here. We have to smell. We have to be able to touch what's going on now. We need to hear what's going on now. And sometimes that's painful because we don't want to deal with what happened. We don't want to deal with the deaths, the shootings. We don't want to deal with the abusive father, the abusive mother. We don't want to deal with those things. So what we do, we withdraw. We put up a wall. We go around saying, I don't need people. I don't like people. That is a defense mechanism. That's a defense mechanism. We were all designed to be in unity, in connection, in harmony with another person. Nobody was designed to be alone. Nobody was designed to always to want to be by themselves. Right? Why? People will say, oh, there's nothing wrong with me. Your life, you have to, how did we get here? We were all designed to be in community. What happens is once a pain happens, a rejection, then something happens where that causes us to withdraw, and then we're like, this is my happy place. Again, sometimes that's okay, but we have to pay attention to that. I'm saying to you, you got to have a plan. Number one, engaging fully in your life, in the world around you, you owe it to yourself. Okay? How do we engage fully? When you feel like yourself becoming overwhelmed, pay attention to what you're thinking. Pay attention to what you're smelling, the smells around you. Engage, begin to feel. Well, what are you feeling in your body? You have to connect with your body, okay? You have a person for being here. What changed your mood? Identify your stressors, your triggers, challenges, and begin with a plan. Challenge negative, unhelpful thoughts and behaviors. You are not your emotion. You don't have to act on your emotion. Talk to people. So again, when we talk about, at the beginning, I talked about sleeping. Like I said, this was a gentleman, he and I were talking, and we talked about the depression, how sometimes it's just easier to go to sleep. It's just easier to sleep and not have to think about anything, right? And granted, that is true. It is easier to go to sleep, because when we're asleep, we don't have to think about anything. When I'm smoking marijuana, when I'm laughing, when I'm watching TV, when I'm gossiping about other people, when I am, doing other activities, I don't have to think about me, because I don't have to think about my pain. But when I'm telling you, the thing that you're trying to run from, that emotion, that feeling, it always has a way of slipping up on you. It slips up on you in your emotions. When we talk about emotional dysregulation, it slips up on you because the emotion is there and never went away. That's why you're triggered. That's why when something happens, you go from 0 to 100. You start yelling, you start screaming, you get angry, you withdraw. I gotta go take a drink, I gotta smoke, right? Because those emotions are there and we never dealt with it. I'm saying to you, you owe it to yourself to start sleeping less. Start withdrawing less, okay? And ask yourself, what am I withdrawing from? Why am I sleeping so much? What is the pain, okay? If it's a sexual abuse, if it was a rape, if it was sadness, bring it to the surface, right? Lastly, and again, I'm just going to go over this again. How do we do that? The goal is to start by running less, little by little. If you find you're sleeping 8 hours, make a goal to say, I'm only going to sleep 7 hours today. And what am I going to do with that next hour? That next hour, I'm going to begin to journal. I'm going to begin to think. I'm going to begin just to write down those things that are causing me pain and begin to ask myself, what can I do about it, right? I'm begin to write down those challenges that I have and begin to manage them one day at a time. You can't wait on your feelings. Feelings are irrelevant here because your feelings will cause you, and I'm not saying your feelings are not bad, your feelings are not, let me rephrase that, are not important. But what I'm saying is your feelings are, thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are connected. Your feelings can change. Your feelings are connected to your thoughts, to your behaviors. So if you're thinking, that your life is bad, or that you're feeling overwhelmed, or things will not work out for you, or you're thinking that you're a loser, or you're thinking that life has never worked out for you, that's how you're going to feel. So your feelings are true in the sense that it connects to your thoughts. But we can change feelings. Feelings we want to think about realistically, okay? It may be true that I'm a loser in the past. It may be true that things didn't work out for me in the past, but it's not true that things have to stay this way. It may be true that I was physically and sexually abused. It may be true that no one ever cared about me in the past, but it's not true that things have to stay that way. So again, we have to begin to challenge those negative thoughts. We have to begin to challenge those thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that are not serving us, that are not helping us, right? We have to engage fully in life. You are here for a purpose. God created you for a wonderful purpose. Identify your stressors, triggers, challenges, and begin to plan. Challenge those negative, unhelpful thoughts, behaviors. You are not your emotion. You don't have to act on your emotion. Just because you feel a certain way, you don't have to act on your emotions. You can choose to act on another emotion. Talk to people, right? So sometimes you may need therapy. Sometimes you may need counseling. In that therapy, it could be whether some people like doing spiritual counseling, sometimes talking to a friend, sometimes talking to people who share the same experiences can be helpful. Many times people are in a household, everybody experienced the same trauma, but nobody's talking. Sometimes it's just a matter of saying, you know, hey, let's talk about what happened to us as a family. So again, what I'm talking about, starting from the beginning, sleeping, withdrawal, procrastination, daydreaming, fantasy, drug use, distractions, watching too much TV, are strategies that we use sometimes without even knowing it to keep us from facing the reality of our life. What strategies, what distractions are you using? Is it sex? Is it going out to the club too much? Is it church? Is it spirituality? You know, some people go from one spiritual thing to another. You go from yoga, you go from Hinduism, you go from chanting, you go from Christianity, one thing to another. What are you hiding from? What are you running from? What are you trying to avoid? Treat your depression. So connect with what is going on around you. How do you connect? By admitting your feelings, by identifying what is going on with me. What am I running from? Pay attention to what is going on in your body. Where's the pain at? Where does it hurt? Pay attention to your feelings. Identify your triggers, stresses, and plans. We have to connect with life. We have to connect with life. Okay? So again, this has been It's Getting Better All the Time, Mental Health Outreach, providing information and support while encouraging hope and faith with your host, Sister Ayla Green. You can find out more about us by logging on to our website at igbattmho.org. Again, we got to manage our emotions. Why? Because you're better than that. You're better than what happened to you in the past. God created you with a wonderful